Hi, nice to be with you here. I'm at the University of Iceland, actually, the public university. There's a private university called Reykjavik University as well. I was sat on the Constitutional Council, which we had operating here last year, and we're now waiting to see what happens with this document, which we submitted to the Parliament about almost a year ago, 11 months ago today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how that came to be. You've probably all heard about what happened in Iceland. We had a banking collapse. This is our prime minister, the man in the dark, respectable suit. This is the scariest moment I've ever lived in Iceland. He actually said, "God bless Iceland," on TV. And for Americans, that's very common to hear. We never hear that here. And I think for almost everybody, this is the moment when we knew something very, very serious was happening. And this is the day after the last bank fell, the day after my mom's birthday. And we didn't know how to react. We had no idea what we could do. People started showing up in front of the parliament. That's the picture at the top. There's a little girl in her parents' arms. There's a sign that says, "Daddy, how much do I owe?" This is what people were concerned about. This is what was going to happen, how much were our children going to be left with paying. And we started being very civil and very cordial, very much like Icelanders tend to be. You give a talk in Iceland, nobody will raise their hand and right away after the talk and ask a question. We always wait for somebody else to go first. So we sat around, we waited, we started going every Saturday, we started going downtown and standing in front of the parliament, and we waited and we waited and we waited. October 6th is the day that the prime minister tells us that something is very wrong. January 20th, parliament was reconvening, and they were going to show up. This is the day Barack Obama took office. They were going to go into the parliament and start talking about whether to let us buy alcohol in grocery stores. And at that point, we gave up. And we showed up downtown and we started banging our pots and pans, and we demanded change. The picture at the bottom is from the student newspaper, actually from a couple of years, a year and a half after the crash. And it says the cost of being neglectful, of not caring. And there's somebody standing in a hotel downtown right in front of the parliament looking at the TV at the story that is happening right in front of them. And that's sort of the moment when we stopped doing that. And we said, this is enough. And within a week, the government had failed. We got a new government, which took to heart the message that people had been standing outside of the parliament for 3 months saying, we need to look at what went wrong. We need to look at our foundations. We need to respond and think about what it is that we do. And we're very good at reacting to crises. My cousin's going to be up here in the next session and tell you about how we do that. All of these pictures are taken after the crash. This is the tourist eruption that we had at the bottom. This one was really cool. You could just go out and look at it. And then came Eyjafjallajökull, and that was a scary one. And that one broke apart bridges across rivers and kept all the airplanes grounded and so on. But we're good at this. We know what to do. This is the bottom picture is what Reykjavik looked like when the ashes came in our direction and you couldn't put your kids out to play because of the ashes. We know how to do this. This is no problem. We did not know how to react to something that people had done. So we stood outside and we protested. We made a mess. We even tore down the Christmas tree that the Norwegians give us every year, and we burnt it. Then there were some fairly serious protests. The police force is very small, and it's ill-prepared to handle something like this. And one of the most powerful moments that I've ever seen was when the police were being threatened because there were some very violent protesters in there. And the protesters that were there to change their society and not to tear it apart, they stepped in front of the policemen and took the hits and said, "Stop, we're not going to do this violently." And that's sort of the magical thing. Just like when we react to these environmental or natural hazards, people stepped up and said, "I want to help. Give me a way, give me a way in, and I'll contribute." And one of the groups that was started was this women's group, which is at the bottom, where my friends and I experienced, and I started talking to my friends about this, and we all had the same experience, that after the crash, if I didn't speak to myself, I'd never heard a woman's voice. They were all men that were making the decisions. The media was just talking to men. And we said, okay, there's something really serious wrong here. We need to have women participating as well. So this group got together and tried to give women a voice. There were all sorts of other voices that started to self-publish, promote different ideas. People started recycling, remaking clothes. A lot of the women in this group, they said, okay, I'm really good at taking old clothes and turning them into new ones. I want to teach you. And we sort of minimized, like, consumption shrank. And I actually heard, I was kind of upset at the news when I was writing in this morning, that for the first time since the crash, we imported more than we exported in May this year. So we really sort of stopped consuming as much, and we started to try to learn from one another and try to make the best of what we already have. And that's what people were doing with the protests. And out of this came this process, the demand that the government responded to finally was that we should write a new constitution. We should revisit our foundations and see who we are, because we never really done that. We got a Danish constitution from the king in 1874. And if you walk past the prime minister's office, it's the little White House, right? The next hill over from where Ingólfur stands. There's a statue of a man sort of with a rolled up scroll, and that's the constitution being brought to Iceland from the king. And it had gone through some minimal changes in that time, but we never had this conversation about who we are and what we want to be, where we want to go from, where we want to go to. So 1,000 people were contacted. They were drawn with a random sample. Statistical variation ensured that people were represented from all ages and different parts of the country, and both men and women, and they were called in for one day to talk about who we are. What do you want? And these are the word clouds that came out of it. 950 people showed up as volunteers. They were paid a nominal fee for the day. 200 people volunteered to work in this event. And this is what came out. I know most of you don't speak Icelandic, but nation, natural resources, constitution, healthcare. These are some of the main concerns, the biggest words in the top cloud, which are just the general ones. And then the values that we hold, the bottom cloud: responsibility, equality, democracy, honesty, respect, human rights, justice, and freedom. And these are the values that we want to build on. This is what we want to move us forward. From this, a committee was set up of these people at the top of the picture. They're constitutional experts mostly, and they took the body of work that came out of this meeting and they drafted a 700-page document, which we were given, my colleagues, 24 colleagues, and me, 25 of us. We were given this document with scholarly reports, with these ideas and the justifications of this general meeting of people, what they wanted to see in the Constitution. And my favorite is this little webpage screenshot that I put, the Constitution of the youth. UNICEF and the Children's Ombudsman organized a few week-long series culminating in a 2-day event where young people up to 18 years old came together and wrote what they thought would be a good constitution and gave it to us. And so there were really like magical, inspiring things taking place leading up to this. There were also a lot of negative things, but I'm not going to go into them. We were delayed because of all sorts of glitches in the legislation and so on. But in the end, we got together. There were 25 of us working. We were given 3 months with a possibility of renewing for 1 more month to work. We got a small staff, And we spent a couple of weeks figuring out how we were going to do this, because there was nothing in the law or the parliamentary resolution in the end that told us how you're going to do this. Just here you go, write a constitution or fix the one that we have. And we broke up into committees, and we decided that we were going to. We divided the issues that were listed in the parliamentary resolution, and we divided them up, and we broke into 3 committees. And we decided that we're going to work in an iterative way, that we're going to always go through everything, throw it out to the public, to one another, and then go back to it. And we're always going to try to make sure that we're as transparent and as open as we can. We got a lot of coverage in the international media saying that we were crowdsourcing. I wouldn't call it that, actually. We wrote everything out. We worked Mondays, Tuesdays. We worked in committees. In my committee, we made sure that we never took a text out of the room unless everybody in the committee could say, yeah, I'm fine with it. You didn't have to be 100% behind it, but if you said, no, I'm not okay with this at all, we wouldn't present it. On Wednesdays, we would get together with the other committees and we'd show them where we were. And if the other committees were okay, we would put the text out online, and then we would have an open meeting on Thursdays. And on Thursdays, everything would go online. We'd have open meetings. You could show up. A lot of people showed up to sit in the room with us. A lot of people, there were still, this is a screenshot I took just this morning, there were still over 5,500 likes on the Facebook page. And we put everything on Facebook, we put everything on Twitter, we ran a Flickr and a YouTube, and you name it, we did it. And on the webpage, this is the bottom 2 shots show you the chapter, the human rights chapter. And on the left-hand side, you see the first couple of articles. And on the right-hand side, you see our explanations. Why are we phrasing it like this? There's a link to previous versions. This is the second to final draft. This is a draft. It's not the final text. There may have been some very slight changes. So you can click on, like, what did this look like before? Why were the changes made? And at the bottom, you can see Facebook comments. We had more than 3,000 comments on Facebook, via Facebook, to the document. And we had 300 letters from people, not just in Iceland, but from all around the world that thought, this is cool, we should suggest things to them. And we got all sorts of ideas about different things that we maybe weren't thinking about. Some we got in there and some we didn't. But so this is the way that we did it. But nothing came into the document that we didn't pass through our committee. So it's not like we opened up a document and said, hey, let's write a constitution. Anybody just plug in whatever they feel like should be in there. So we spent 4 months like this. We actually did go out of town one day, part of us. The 200th anniversary of Jón Sigurðsson, who is the hero of the Icelandic independence campaign. His statue stands in front of the parliament. His biggest dream was that Iceland would get a constitution of its own. And his 200th birthday was June 17th last year. So we went to his birthplace to celebrate it. But most of the time was spent, like the bottom 2 pictures, sitting around a table, 8 to 12, 15 people, plugging through text, looking at comments. Are we responding to the ideas that we're getting from other people? Are we in concert with what came from the National Assembly? Are we within the bounds of the law? Because we figured we can't really write something in the Constitution which can't be legislated. And this was often very difficult to explain to people who wanted us to just criminalize the banks or eliminate private property, which would have been interesting, but I don't think would have worked. So this is what we did for 4 months. We sat in a room and we talked. We talked until we were blue in the face. And we tried so hard to get to a consensus that in the end, I think that was one of the problems, that people got so focused on us having to deliver a consensus that we were getting a little timid of disagreeing. And that's where you get into a bit of a problem. So in the end, we ran out of time, and we spent the last 4 days in this big room, and we spent it voting. And that's where we lost some things. Like I didn't get in certain clauses that I thought were very important, and other people lost on issues that they thought were very important. So in the end, after all of this hard work, working on consensus and trying to sort of change the political culture, we resorted to majority rule. And some issues we had to take out of meetings and try to break up and try to negotiate, because there were issues that, because there was such a strong focus that we had to get this unanimous in the end, that we could all pass it. And there were issues that were so big that I and some of my other colleagues said, I'm not going to be able to say yes to the document if this is in there. And then that was considered by some to be very forceful of us, that we were breaking up the consensus. I wasn't one of the ones that thought consensus was the be-all and end-all. But so that's how we ended up doing this. And the next time I write a constitution, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I would have a little bit of a break in between. We worked for 4 months straight. By the time that we got to this point, this is a word cloud of the final text, by the time we got to this point, we were so saturated with our own ideas that we couldn't separate the trees from the forest. And we would have had to have a little bit of a break in between. From the time that we got the document done, we should have left it and come back to it in a couple of months. But that's the problem often, I think, in a small community. You have to get everything done really quickly. You have to finish things right away. And that's because that's the way we're used to it. Everybody just shows up and gets it done. And this is a little bit different. So it's this document is now, sort of ironically, the biggest word there is parliament, Alþingi. Alþingi has the trust of about 9% of the population at the moment. And we are saying Alþingi is the most important institution in the country. I think it is, and I hope that they have the good fortune of doing what is best for all of us and get this through in the next year. And after that, you can really call me a founding mother. Thank you.